All right. Good morning. How are you, Mr. Vidal?
Good morning, Tim. Happy. It's Saturday, right? Yeah, it's Saturday.
We are on January 11th, 2025, on a Saturday morning here to talk about Frank Miller. Our schedule's lined up. I'm snowed in. You guys have a devastating 40 degrees down there where you're
It's
at.
terrible. It's the end of
Yes.
the world.
Yes.
The sun is out. It's 40 degrees, and yes, it's the end of the world for us people here in this part of Texas.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just to let people know, woe is me. We had a pipe bust in my house, and I woke up and found this morning. And at
Okay.
10 minutes before we were starting the show, we got everything to where we got a ton of water up, and I'm gonna have to go buy a shop vac after the show. So you're going to hear some noises in the back. I have a dehumidifier going, a couple heaters, So yeah, we had a disaster here. And
Okay.
Gore Vidal, he got me through it, man. No. But anyway, we are here to talk about something fantastic. You suggested this. I'm so glad you did. And it is the 40th anniversary of it as well. But we are talking about Born Again. Yeah. Uh, the classic by Frank Miller, David Mazzucchelli.
Yeah.
And this is going to be an absolute deep dive. Let me get us a little closer here. There we go. You think it's going to work? Might want to
That'll
come
work.
over just a little bit if
Yeah.
you can.
That'll work.
Yeah. I think I like that better. You all right with that? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, Tim. It's good
Yeah.
for me. Yeah.
So, yeah, I have all the issues, and I actually got this collection for free from a fan of my YouTube channel back in 2013.
Oh.
Yeah. So I ended up getting my Born Again and in my Frank Miller run of Daredevil for free to replace the little pieces I had here and there. So I didn't really do a proper read of Batman Year One to about 2013, and I've read it about 3 times since then. What's your history with it?
With Batman Year One or with Born Again, Tim?
Oh, did I say Batman Year One?
Yes.
Oh, excuse me. Daredevil, Born Again.
Born Again. Well, it's fair because they were basically done at the same time. I mean,
Yeah.
no, Born Again, when it came out, like you pointed out, it's late '85. I want to say
Right.
maybe December. I think is when I got it. I think, and the book, after all these decades, has always been with me. It's something I often revisit. The comic, as we'll get into it, from the first page, this was something very different from a typical Marvel comic,
Yes.
or DC comic at the time, and the story itself is just it's a powerful story, and it was each issue was an absolute surprise to me. Each one took you on a new emotional level, and that and to this day, stays with you, with the readers.
Right.
I made a video a couple of years ago when I discussed some scenes from this comic, and people who had not commented on my videos for a while appeared again, and because they had also been affected in a positive way by Born Again. And it's just, I think it's a very important work in Miller's career, and also David Mazzucchelli's.
Right. Yeah, these two ended up being a team, a writer artist team that I feel like I wish we had more come from them. The way they click together. But I'm going to stick to Daredevil Born Again. Make sure I focus here. But what's amazing about when this book came out is I feel like this book has always been here. It always blows my mind to realize that Frank Miller, it was around 1979 before he got on Daredevil.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be he would be the penciler of that book until he finally took it over. Jim Shooter took a chance on him. And I think from like 80 to 82, he blew everybody out of the water with Elektra.
Yeah.
And this is relevant to Born Again because I feel like Frank Miller's last issue, I believe, one off the top of my head, in my traumatized state here, is 191.
I think so.
And I actually feel like you can skip everything from 192 all the way up to about 219, maybe 226. when Frank Miller returns. He wrote one issue,
Yeah.
and David Mazzucchelli had been penciler probably since around issue 208, if I had to take a
I
guess.
think so, around that time, yeah.
Right. So this almost feels like it picks up from his run, because we pick up with this book is actually should be a prequel. They don't really follow it as a part of Born Again. But in this issue, it kind of plants the seeds. It foreshadows, in my opinion, what's to come, the themes and things in Born Again. We have a very paranoid Daredevil, Matt Murdock, going around. He's already starting to slowly lose things. He and Foggy are having problems. His girlfriend's mad at him. She ends up getting with Froggy, his business partner, best friend since college. And he thinks his life just sucks. And he's starting to have flashbacks, being with Stick, where Stick tells him he's never been on his own path. He became a lawyer because his dad told him to. He does what women want, because that's the thing about Matt Murdock and what Frank Miller did, in my opinion. He made him Catholic. He shot it full of religion, and then he energized it with sex. The whole thing about Matt Murdock and Daredevil and Electra. Where did Electra come from? Augmentin those.
Basically, from Greek tragedies is Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, and it goes back to the old Euripides, Aeschylus stories from over 2,000 years ago.
Right. He made it a Greek tragedy. I think that's what he pulled into there. You went exact. You said, I was trying to remember that term, and you got it. Perfectly. That's where I was trying to go with it. It was a Greek tragedy. So if you were a Frank Miller fan, I can just imagine that this book comes out. We have Crisis on Infinite Earths going on, Squadron Supreme going on. Wait a minute, Secret Wars 2 going on, X Factor going on, the return of Jean Grey. John Byrne is still on Fantastic Four, because the two biggest superstars, in my opinion, of the 80s were John Byrne, Frank Miller, Chris Claremont, is how I kind of think. And then all of a sudden we get this story with Frank Miller where the magic of it, as I mentioned before, is that he's going to take once again Daredevil, break him down, because I've seen Frank Miller say that he knows that all those guys in the 60s, when they made Daredevil, he knew they were calling it in. They had a lot of work to do. They threw this character together. So Daredevil is like, we're going to talk about Matt now. Because the magic of this is that, to me, it's a crime story, not a superhero story. And we get rid of the costume, and that's going to be a theme. So I'll shut up there so I don't go on my tangent. I'm starting to get excited, man. I'm getting excited,
No, this book, no, I'm glad I'm doing this with Tim, because Tim, I mean, the book extremely well. And I agree with everything you said regarding the book. It's a Matt Murdock story, and also a supporting character story. There's one of those situations where the supporting characters are very important to the story and integral to the story. And what arrested me in this book was someone I had not thought about for a long time. But I opened the page. I mean, I knew Frank was coming back on.
Right.
And I opened the page, but I didn't read anything about what it was going to be about. And what do I see in these beautiful pages? I'll just show this. This was not what I expected. And you look at the beautiful coloring here. It's almost like black and white, right? And I see.
Yeah. And this is why I thought it was a noir. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, I've got you on solo, sir.
No, you're right, because you turn the next page and you see the Kingpin there. But certainly this part here, I hadn't thought about Karen. But then I see Karen Page. But this is not the secretary Karen Page that I'm used to seeing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that was her. And in that one page, it established that she's hooked on drugs. She's been making pornographic films. She's in a dire state. She is spiritually crippled to a degree, which is going to be a theme throughout this story for Karen and for Matt.
Yeah.
And I like this path that they're both going. This path through their own their own internal hell inside. And I was just arrested by that. And I'm thinking, what? What's happening in this book? And automatically on that one page, I was in.
Yeah. I'm going to do a brief synopsis here to let people know where we're at. Because they never read it, because every comic can be, I always give Stan Lee credit. Every comic can be somebody's first comic.
Mhm.
Every video could be somebody's first video about whatever you're talking about. Karen Page was a Silver Age character that was Matt Murdock's secretary. Now, Silver Age, we're talking the 60s, okay? Very innocent time, right? The Fantastic Four in issue 2 walked right into Matt Murdock's office because he was their lawyer. Matt Murdock had another alter ego called Mike Murdock for like, I don't know, a year or two, where it was his twin brother who could see. That if he ever got caught being too comfortable. Then all of a sudden we shoot up here with Frank Miller, who has taken Karen Page, and in the story, I think she's been gone 2 years. Matt Murdock is floating around in this issue before here, complaining about his life, that he's taking everything for granted, and he doesn't realize, nor did the reader know, that this is letting us know where Matt is at in his attitude. And he's not even 30 yet, and Karen's only been gone for 2 years in Marvel time, not our time. And then within 2 years, she ends up in Mexico doing porn, hooked on the horse. You know what I mean? So that was pretty jarring to take a Silver Age character and do that to. You know what I mean? I mean, this was before it was commonplace to, we were getting to that point where they were starting to take all the characters and give them feet of clay, if you will, do horrible things to them. So Matt Murdock, Daredevil, should have been a villain. What's funny about this is that what I wanted to point out, just to get this out of the way, is that the third part of this came out at Christmas, December 24th, 1985, according to Marvel Age, the release date. That's the same month Booster Gold #1 came out. So
tarnishing this stream, team. You're tarnishing this stream.
So this is the state that we're looking at. Crisis had ended that same month. The first book that DC put out that was for the new DC universe was Booster Gold, and we got Frank Miller and them doing this.
The opposite, the complete opposite spectrum.
Right. So there you go. That's the comic field at the time. Silver Age characters and stuff, right? So just to kind of tell you what's coming up with the themes in this is that this is the Gladiator. The Gladiator is another Silver/Bronze Age villain, but the difference is that he came around. He was just sick in the head, and he is being forced, much like Matt Murdock was being forced to be a lawyer and things like his father made him. This guy is being forced to rob jewelry, and he's doing it because somebody's holding his girlfriend. So right away, you have the two things about Matt Murdock. He didn't follow his own path, and he's resentful. And in women play, his romantic life is a disaster. Another reason that, between the way he grew up, his childhood, where he grew up and everything, the Daredevil should have been a villain, but he didn't because it's Matt. That's Matt. So in this one, this guy can't put on the costume. That's why he's dressed like an actual gladiator. And he goes into like how he feels hot and sweaty and stuff in it when there's nothing to it. And that's letting you know that there's a duality they're going to be playing with. Clothes do not make the man. That is a theme that goes through this on top of all the Catholicism. So so that's why this is a prequel. We know that Matt is taking things for granted. He's paranoid. He didn't resolve issues from when Frank Miller left the series with Elektra's death and all this stuff going on. So what happens when you take things for granted? You're going to lose them. And that's what happens here. So that's going to take us into the actual Born Again story. So I'll take over there if you'd like.
Yeah, basically at this point is that was a wonderful introduction attempt to that prequel, which I had not thought about until you brought it up today. And I've not read that issue in a long time. And Tim, was it Denny O'Neil that wrote that book, or did he did Frank have some plotting with it?
Denny O'Neil was leaving the book, which is why they asked. He might have co-plotted this one with him to kind of.
But I wonder if maybe he told Denny, "This is what I plan to do," and I'm curious about that.
There's about 2 paragraphs where he comes in, and it was Ralph Macchio. If I remember right, I didn't really read this. Or Ralph Macchio. Let me make sure I'm remembering this right. Yeah. Ralph Macchio, I know I butcher names because I learned them from reading. But what happened is that Frank Miller proposed what he wanted to do in Born Again to Ralph Macchio. And Ralph Macchio kept saying, yeah, that sounds good. Frank Miller had been gone about 5 years, I think, from Marvel. So this was very different. Macchio kept going, yeah, sure. And then Frank got suspicious and said, why are you so easy going with this? what had happened is that thanks to Frank Miller's run, no, wait a minute, yeah, thanks to Frank Miller's original Daredevil run,
Yes.
Walt Simonson got inspired to do what he wanted on Thor, and they let him do, and that became a classic run.
That's
So
interesting. Did not know that.
Ralph Macchio had, I don't know if he was
Huh.
the editor at the time of Thor, but he learned that if you let somebody be creative and go and they're capable, let them go. So it came full circle. Frank inspired Walt, Walt inspired Macchio. Frank got to do what he wanted to do. And I think that's the magic there. Frank got to do what Frank wanted to do when he was still capable, if we'll put it that way. He had a vision. Ralph heard the vision, and even it was so easy. You know, he was even Frank was even like suspicious. It was so easy to go. All right, that's from that. I'm pretty sure that's in that Marvel Age I just showed. There, you know, it goes into other things that Frank was going to do with Sienkiewicz and Elektra and a graphic novel and all this stuff. They didn't talk about what was coming up in Born Again, which tells me I don't think they thought or knew they were about to have a classic here. Okay.
I mean, when you think about it, because you mentioned Booster Gold and some of the other comics, and they were coming in. Watchmen was just around the corner, right?
Right. This was a great. This was probably the last, in my opinion, so much quality was about to come out. You follow what I mean?
Yeah, Dark Knight had already dropped because he did this after Dark Knight Returns, and so but even Dark Knight, even though it has a lot of realistic elements in it, in a way, it's almost like a science fiction story.
Right.
What made this one so resonant was that it was real. Like we could know these people. These people.
It's a crime story, not a superhero story. That's what I think. Yeah.
And so it's the people that we know. And so basically is you have Karen Page, who loved Matt Murdock, and Matt Murdock loved her at one point. I mean, early on. Now we're not going to get into Elektra here because Elektra is a whole nother matter here.
Right.
But he loved Karen. So what Karen has done is that she has sold his identity for a fix. She's that desperate.
Right off the front, it's what, second page. Yeah.
And eventually it goes up and it arrives in the hands of the Kingpin. Now the Kingpin at this point wants to verify if this is true, that Matt Murdock is in fact Daredevil. And so he spends, I think it was like 6 months finding this out and plotting. And then in this one issue, you have Matt Murdock going through his life. He's looking for a job. He's no longer with Foggy. And he's wondering why he's not getting any letters like from law firms. He's a top lawyer. No one's offering him a job. And so we go through this process with Matt. His girlfriend, Glory, you know, he's not returning her calls. But you already alluded to, there was already issues with her from his end, not on hers. His relationship with Foggy was a little bit off. And then he starts getting these notices in the mail about his mortgage not being paid, his credit being bad.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the IRS is auditing him. And he's like, what's happening here? And it doesn't click in him, you know, that something, you know, sinister is going on. He just thinks there's mistakes being made, or from his end, administrative, things happen and such. But things just get progressively worse. And what's happening is when he's just I think it's in this issue, when he's talking to his accountant regarding the IRS, and the person says, Matt, I always thought you were an honest guy.
Yeah.
And so you get this theme. We always thought you were a straight up guy. And Matt goes, what do you mean? So people begin to question his character, but it's almost like people who have known him for a long time. And that becomes also a theme in the story. People that he's known, something happens like this and they begin to move away.
Yeah.
One of the few that stands by his side is Foggy. And that does. Yeah. And so this is where we are with this issue, is you have the story of a man, not Daredevil, but of a man who's being psychologically, slowly, really, but they're really serious slices. He's being like spiritually killed to death by slow cuts.
Yeah. Let me interject a timeline here. I could be wrong.
Please do.
Karen, as you said, sells his identity in Mexico to get a hit of heroin. 6 weeks later, it makes it to Kingpin. 6 months later, we get the Kingpin. We don't know Kingpin has done it yet, but he's having his bills not getting paid. His finances are frozen. His mortgage hasn't been paid in 2 to 3 months. The IRS is auditing him. There's other things going on. That's 6 months later. And then this story goes over 6 months. That's 666.
That's right. I thought about that too. The number
Yeah.
666. It's
Yeah.
sort of like that. What Frank is doing through all this, and he's not ramming it down your face. It's not telling you, the reader, okay, you got to see this. You got to look for these things.
Yeah.
And you not really look for them. I mean, you'll notice these. Maybe not immediately, but it's after like a second reread or a third reread.
Yeah.
Like with any good work of literature, because with this, I think this is what this is.
Yeah.
You begin to see what the writer's doing and what the artist is doing with these wonderful stories here. And basically is he begins, and the Kingpin is doing these terrible things. He has a police officer, a decorated police officer, 20-year veteran, spot on record in a police organization, which is rather corrupt. But this man is able to, be above that. However, he has now basically sworn some kind of affidavit accusing Matt Murdock of basically, I think, bribing a juror or something and fixing a trial.
He found the one good cop to make that happen.
He found the one good cop that could this happen to, when no one would question that man. Because up until this point, Matt's integrity has not been questioned. But now you have one good cop questioning Matt, and all these other things are happening to Matt Murdock. So maybe the Matt Murdock the public knew is not the Matt Murdock we all knew, right?
Right.
And so, but Matt doesn't know that this man's son is very ill, and he can't afford the medical bills. The Kingpin, I guess, found this out, and basically, you help me, I'll save your son, but you have to destroy Matt Murdock by lying. And what's happening is Matt becomes Daredevil to find out what's happening, and he's just losing it. He's absolutely losing it. He's going around the city, beating people up here and there.
Yeah.
Finding out.
The Kingpin even had people following Matt Murdock to take pictures of him so he can watch him continue down his
enjoying
mental state.
He's absolutely savoring, destroying, basically seeing this man suffer.
The devil is in the details. He methodically thought out everything so he can savor and enjoy it and never be there.
And all that is in just this one issue.
Yeah.
That's how much is in here. And then the final thing is when he's just really frustrated. He says goodbye to his partner, Foggy. Foggy, he doesn't let him know what's going on. Foggy's standing by him, trying to help him. He loses his law license. He loses all these things, and he thinks, okay.
Disbarred. His girlfriend is trying to seduce Foggy. Foggy's doing what he can to fight it, but
Foggy, and then when he gets home, finally the one home is brownstone that he loves. It's blown. It's completely blown up.
Yeah.
And that's when he realizes the man behind this is the Kingpin.
And you shouldn't have signed it. I love that line.
Yeah, you shouldn't have signed it. That's right. It's right. Yeah, you shouldn't have signed it right down here. And you have all this. So this is basically under 30 pages. And you have all this packed in. Beautiful panels that tell just wonderful story. And look at the lighting there. Like, you're right, because she is, she's falling for Foggy.
Yeah.
Maybe she's a little bit angry at Matt, right?
Right.
And Foggy's falling for her. I like that look there. And so he goes, I think I'll sleep on the couch. I mean, all these subtleties in this. I mean, this is not, you wouldn't see this in Titans. You wouldn't see this in X-Men. Not like this. And not that you should. Again, I'm not saying that. But this is how this book was so different from a regular mainstream Marvel and DC comic. And it really stood out. I mean, an adult could pick up this book. Because remember, I saw a Comics Journal article from 1980-81. And it said that the average reader of the superhero comics was 12 years old. There's 1980, right? So basically, kids are still reading this book, like I was, like you were. And the thing is, wow, and so the comics were already starting what Miller had done. He already had done this before, but now he's back and he's doing it again. But this time you don't have a Bullseye. You don't have an Elektra. You have, like you said, Tim, this is a Matt Murdock story. It's real people. It's Karen Page. It's Glory. It's Fisk. It's Kingpin. And there's these other people around. There's a police officer and Ben Urich, who plays an important part throughout this story. Ben Urich being the reporter who's always supported Matt, and now he's being a witness to Matt's deterioration. And then he finds out what's happening here, but then even he is tested. Even he is tested.
Now, guys, Ben Urich in this, I want to comment on this,
Yes.
and I'm going to try not to show any kind of bias and stuff, and I want to be nostalgic. But the whole thing about Ben Urich is that he, at least with Frank Miller in this story, it's from an era when a private investigator, a investigative reporter was an investigative reporter without any propaganda, wasn't leaning one way or the other. They were out to expose corruption and bad. Think Watergate. We were still in that era. And Ben Urich, Ben, is still a human being. I mean, he's not, he's not turned into like Mr. Morals. He's just, what's the word? He's got integrity. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. He's got his journalistic integrity is right there. And they come at him. He goes through as much. Yeah, he goes through as much psychologically as Murdoch does. Yeah, in a way. Yeah. Let me do comments real quick. Real quick, and we'll move on.
Good morning, everybody. Whoever's here. Yeah. Thank you for being here, and happy Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. We got John here, guys. Make sure you are like John. Thumbs up, subscribe, hit that bell. The Library 88, good morning. Yeah, Zinc Age Comics, good to see you, man. I'm so glad you popped up again here. Dancing Godzilla, morning. A Pilgrim. I like Denny O'Deal Daredevil. All right, cool. JP Fawn is here. Legion of Comics. We have the great Paulo Costa. Lunch is done. Whiskey time now. That suits a Frank Miller story. Let's face it.
Thanks.
Victor Shade, and then Paolo's got some actual comments. Karen Page has been a ghostwriter supporting character for years by that time. When she appeared in Fall from Grace, I was 9 and had no idea who she was. I didn't know she was in Ghost Rider. That's wild. Okay. I knew who Heather Glenn was, but she had died a couple months before. The first real match of Julie Art in Daredevil 220 titled Fog. Okay. Got you, Paolo. I've got the whole run. I got a huge 150 issue run of Daredevil. I pulled these out of. Born Again, the Brazilians called this arc Murdoch's Fall, which is why I always get it confused with Fall from Grace. Got you. Fall from Grace is where oh God, what was that guy's name? Scott McCloud? No, not McCloud. No. Anyway, the artist gave a horrible new costume.
Yeah, all these little blades sticking out of him.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Scott McDonald, maybe? McDaniel. I don't know.
McDaniel. Yeah, I think it's McDaniel.
Poke and Joe comic review. Good morning.
Hey, Poke.
John was all over this Daredevil run as a kid. There we go. All right. So now we have the first methodical, complete plan A of the Kingpin has been completed for us.
Yes.
And we have a cliffhanger. And right away, Murdoch, he knows it's the Kingpin. All right. Like you said, the first issue lets you know the plot, lets you know what's going on. And now we have that moment where you can see that the stakes are unbelievable. Right.
Yeah,
and now we reach a point where we're not going to see the Daredevil costume on Matt for 3 more issues. Okay. And that plays a part into it. You want to go through the second part here? I know the story as a whole, not issue by issue. We'll do this however you want, Gore.
Basically is at this point, yes, but his home has been blown up. He's got nowhere to go. And he's not asking for help from anyone.
Right.
He really is not. And he's got maybe $30 to his name.
Right.
He's living in this rundown, basically, hotel that he picks up. And one thing to always remember about Matt Murdock is his senses are amplified. And so he can smell, hear things that we don't want to smell, we don't want to hear. Now, one thing I was thinking about, Tim, when we were going to discuss this, is his senses are amplified. And I wonder if his emotions are also amplified.
I don't think it's so much his emotions. I think they're stimulated enough to where he's had to deal with that.
Yeah,
I've always considered, and I'm going to be, I've said it before, when it comes to Daredevil, and it's because I heard this when I was a kid, when the grown-ups would read the Daredevil,
Yeah.
he was a pussy hound. And I think it's because of those heightened senses and pheromones and
Sure.
stuff. I also think that pheromones can be like a drug, which is why he has to go for superhero women, intense women, exciting women. You got to have more to excite the brain than just this Irish girl that he obviously doesn't really give a crap about, right?
Yeah.
But real quick, I want to point out everybody who reads this knows this. But like I said, this could be somebody's first thing is that the splash page of each issue all go together into some what's the word I'm looking for? Catholic iconography. You know, I don't know, man.
I hadn't thought about it. You're right. They do tie in.
Yeah. So basically, he's working his way up to where he goes from a fetal position in each splash page of each one to finally he reaches a Jesus Christ pose, if you will, is what they're going for. The Catholic. This is where the Catholic stuff kind of comes in, and I have limited. I was actually kidnapped by nuns when I was 3, and there's only been 1 or 2 churches around here that are Catholic. Everybody else is Presbyterian and Hellfire and stuff like that. So anyway, we got Matt becoming a broken man. Okay.
Yeah.
He's in a dump, sleeping in there. Meanwhile, we have Kingpin in his penthouse high rise, savoring what he's done. He's slowly become obsessed with him. And I think it's because Matt Murdock is the only person he's ever met that is actually a good person, and that kills him. Because he thinks I can't believe I'm forgetting his wife's name, but he's constantly thinking
Vanessa.
Yeah. He's constantly thinking about Vanessa. They've humanized the devil here, Kingpin. Frank Miller described Kingpin before he got a hold of him as the Jackie Gleason of villains. Whatever. So now all of a sudden we got this big history, and Kingpin just got elevated by him. So Matt Murdock is sitting here thinking he has a plan. Matt Murdock is dingy, dirty. He's living like Rorschach, people. He's finally cracked that mental state, and he thinks he's going to go right after the Kingpin, and he fantasizes how he's going to take him down, and he's going to do it with his fist. He thinks he's going to walk right in there and take out the Kingpin. And now you got to remember, at the time of comics, this is genius. I don't know if this was by design or if this is an Eisner thing. I'm starting to see a little spirit in here. You die, you come back.
Yeah, some of the panels are very Eisner, like very much.
And basically, what happens, the world around Matt just keeps flowing. The girl, Matt's girlfriend keeps getting together. Matt's starting to lose it. He's not putting on the costume. He's going, he's getting super hyper violent with people to get information. Meanwhile, Kingpin is just, we're seeing that he's a player. He may be fat, but it's like sumo, and he's lifting weights. And people are talking to him like, what's this obsession, man? I think you've done good. His lieutenants are trying to tell him you need to slow down. Karen Page is getting abused by her supplier. She sleeps with him, and he's like, I own you now. I think it's in this one. Matt Murdock is beating up gang members on we're getting the world build up. We're seeing the toll mentally that where everybody is at in this, right? And this is where I think a lot of the Catholic religious aspects are starting to come in. We're seeing how everybody is at their lowest, and through forgiveness, they're going to be able to, in forgiveness and belief, and they're going to find themselves again. So before this, there are a series of pictures that show Jesus walking with the cross, and he falls 3 times. Can you expand on that, or did I throw that at you out of the blue? Because that's what's in here. That's the story they're telling. They're slowly telling the story of Jesus in the city started with a G. I can't think of it. But anyway, that's what they're telling. Yeah, that's what they're telling.
That's where he was crucified, Golgotha.
Yeah, we're talking about the crucifixion, and this leads up to that panel where he's in a Jesus Christ pose.
Manifestations of the cross, we have those, and basically you go through these phases where Christ, all the trials he went through before his death, and of course his rebirth, right? The idea that he's reborn, not rebirth, but when he's reborn after the crucifixion,
right?
Now, the thing is about this is regarding with Matt again, this is years afterwards, Tim, for me.
Yeah.
is when I read the Divine Comedy many years later by Dante, which is basically you have the Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise. Dante is a real man, but he's basically just waffling with his life. He's not becoming an unbeliever, but basically he's just stuck in a rut. And a woman that he loved, that he was never involved with, named Beatriz, who's dead, appears to him, and in his book. So, and she is going to have a poet named Virgil lead him through the Inferno and all these other places. And what it is a man who is spiritually is not where he should be.
Okay.
And so he's a Christian, though his faith is not being affected, but he is in a way sinning, so to speak. And because one, he loves Beatrice more than he loves God. It's suggested there. And in Catholicism, that's a mortal sin.
Gotcha.
Right? At least the way it was in the 14th century when he wrote this. So when I read the Divine Comedy, I thought about Born Again. And I thought, what is happening here? And Karen Page could be like a Beatrice. But not just Karen Page, we're about to get this, but the nun Maggie as well. Regarding Karen, I wanted just to with two things about what's happening already in these two issues. Kingpin's beginning to psychologically work on Matt. Because one thing about Catholicism is one's actions are as important as one's faith. And
now
some
where I want to be.
And some Protestant faith it's faith. And then if you have Calvinism, you have predestination, where actions do not matter. That God
keep talking. I'm going to shut this door. I can hear you. I got to shut this door. Go ahead.
So God has already pre-selected people who are going to be saved. And no matter how good you are on this earth, it doesn't matter. God has already picked who's going to be saved under Calvinism and some Protestant faith. But under Catholicism, one's actions are the ones that are going to, when the day comes, when you die,
right,
all these things are going to be balanced out. Now, with Matt, there's a scene and there's some panels where he's on the subway.
Yes.
And these guys are doing terrible things to people, and he does nothing. He does nothing until they finally get to him. There's a woman next to him. She's being physically assaulted, beaten, her necklace being taken out, and he just stands there and does nothing. So it's already the Kingpin's actions already having an effect. It's not until they come at him that he, beats him up. And then you have Karen. The Kingpin has sent orders that anyone who this information has gone through before it gets to him must be killed.
Gotcha. Okay.
Including Karen. So Karen is now early in the story. She's she's being selfish early on. This is what I liked about this. One of the many things I like about this. We see Karen in a very unsympathetic light up until this point. She's being extremely selfish. She sells out Matt for a fix. Now, she does not know what her actions have done. She does not know what has happened to Matt Murdock.
That's a good point. I never thought about that. I never thought about that.
Know.
Yeah.
And all this time, she wants to find Matt because now that people want to kill her, and she wants to get back to New York because Matt can help her. She associates Matt with hope. And so even though she knows what she's done, she doesn't know the consequences of it. She is still wants to find Matt so that he can save her.
Right.
And so, again, what I like about this is what he's doing here, what Miller's doing here, and Mazzucchelli are doing here, is the way they're setting this up in a way you see Karen Page in a very unsympathetic light. You still feel pity for her, but you're thinking, what is she doing here? And then you see Matt, who we all like, but now we see him broken in this way. You're thinking, Matt, what are you doing? I mean, we understand, but what are you doing? What's happening here? You're letting all your passions take over you, which again, in Dante's Divine Comedy, the Inferno is all about that.
Right.
Where people's
material and flesh.
All these things, these are flesh, but our anger, our greed, all these things that make us very human You know, I mean, I think Poke Joe is here, and I think Joe had said something on another stream that he was on that I agreed with him about stoicism, because he also, follows the Stoic philosophers as you do, as I do. Is that, are there good people? Are there bad people? Or that doesn't exist? There's people's actions. Maybe by degree, more of them are good, or maybe by degree, more of them are bad. But there's no such thing as a good person. There's no such thing as a bad person. Now, when
Right.
someone passes away, maybe then we'll say, she was a very good person. He was a good person. But we base that basically, without really thinking about it, on what we knew about them, right? And I think what's happening here is this: what Miller and Mazzucchelli has done. Maybe it wasn't intentional, but it comes across is as he treats these as real people.
Yeah.
And we see why Kingpin is upset. Matt Murdock has made his life terrible, but you still see a side of the Kingpin that he does find someone like Vanessa, even though it's very subtle. Vanessa was a good person. He loved Vanessa, and maybe she saw something good in the Kingpin, and which the Kingpin thinks that he did. But now he's estranged from his wife, from events that happened before in Daredevil when Miller was writing it. Anyway, that's where we are with these two things. She's trying to get back to New York. Matt, like you said, has these fantasies of just crushing the Kingpin, but it doesn't go Matt's way.
Right. And I think this is the first fall. He falls 3 times throughout this story, just like Jesus did.
Yeah, I'm glad
Thank you,
that out.
Joe.
About that.
Yeah, Golgotha. This is the story they're telling. So that's probably why the first time I read this, I didn't get everything that was in this story. I was stuck on the crime aspect. And I could see the religion iconography in there, or I keep trying to think what that word is, and I'm killing it. But anyway, the religious stuff, is in there. So anyway, when he comes up against the Kingpin, now this was a shocker because this is a time where the heroes always won. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let me get this out of the way. And we think after seeing Matt be a badass there on the subway finally, and he's like super escalated. That's the way to put it. He comes at, and this is shades of Batman in Dark Knight Returns going against the gang leader, the mutant leader, before he gets him in the mud and realizes he's a surgeon. But he goes out of him brutally, and no, doesn't go his way. We get it slows down after having a lot of dense stuff in this book. The fight scenes slow the reader down, and we are in the beating with him. Now, here's what's amazing that I really like. I actually think this is some writing genius. Jesus was in a cave for 3 days, correct?
Yeah.
After his crucifixion.
Right.
I felt like, and I could be completely wrong, he throws him in a cab and has the cab drove off into the water. And Daredevil, he stuck Matt Murdock in there. So this is how he's going to get rid of the body. And Matt wakes up. And when they go back to the cave, to the taxi,
that's good.
He's gone. Matt is not in there. And
the body is not there.
And this is when coloring in comic books can play a part of the story. Now he's red. The devil has been colored. Okay. And what do we have? We have Matt Murdock as low as he can go now. Now people think he's dead on top of this, I believe. He's missing or something. And he's disappearing from everybody. Even the Kingpin's going to try to find him here. And he becomes a fry cook.
Yeah.
They should have made him a carpenter. That would have been awesome. But fry cook it is.
That's brilliant, Tim. That's true because for 3 days, Christ's body was in the cave. And then to the shock of everyone, when they come back, the body's gone.
Right.
And the idea is that and the Kingpin here, there's no corpse. There's no corpse. This is brilliant. This is right. And in the Bible, and I forget which book it is, and which brings us to our next part, is the first person that Christ appears to after his resurrection is Magdalene. Is Mary Magdalene. It's a woman.
I actually caught that the first time I read it, and I completely yes,
Oh
yeah.
wow, that's
I
pretty
remember
good. That's
you
pretty
brought
good.
it
I
all
didn't
back.
catch it
Yeah,
at the time.
I
No,
that's yeah. You're bringing back the yeah. See, I went yeah.
but
Okay,
I hadn't thought about it to just now when you mentioned about this part here.
see.
Three
That's
days.
yeah. See,
It
I
doesn't.
know this part of the story in the
Yeah.
Bible. I know this part. All right, I'm familiar with it. You know what I mean? But I remember, oh, I knew that the first time I read it, and it was gone. I could kick. I got to calm down. I could kick myself. Yeah.
No, wonderful. I'm glad you told me this, Tim. I had not thought about that, and until you just mentioned it, now I thought about Magdalene,
Yeah.
because what now comes is to my probably my favorite issue in this storyline, which is this one, Pariah, and which we're about to we'll get into it right now.
Yeah.
And here you have Matt Murdock, and he's in a really bad shape. And then you have these wonderful panels. Oh, yeah, I think you're showing them there, Tim. Is that where you have? He's remembering. Remember, when he was a child, he saved what looked like a blind man. Was that a blind man crossing the street there, Tim?
It
Holding a
should have
cane?
been.
Or maybe
Yeah.
a blind man or an elderly man. He does a good thing. This child risked his life to save this man. Right. Again, under Catholicism, actions matter. Now, he doesn't do it to be saved. He does it because it's the right thing to do. So he saves this man at a cost. So now he's blinded. And now you have Matt Murdock lying in an alley, but thinking about when he was a child, when he experienced pain in a very intense way. The canister has hit his eyes, the radioactive canister that made him blind. His senses are amplified. He doesn't understand why. He smells everything in the hospital. He hears people groaning, all these things, and he feels nothing.
Plus, it's Christmas. It's coming
That's
close to
right. It's
Christmas.
Christmas.
The birth of Christ that we recognize.
Absolutely. It's Christmas, the birth of Christ as recognized. And so he is then he hears his father's voice, and in Catholicism, you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and they're all one, and yet they're not. So he hears his father's voice, and it seems like it's booming, like God speaking to him. But he doesn't realize, because his hearing's amplified. Yeah. And then you get to this other part, which when I read it, I'm thinking, who is this? You have this woman is talking to him as well, which you showed here. This woman appears after the father leaves. He doesn't know who this woman is, not at all.
Neither does the reader. Yeah.
Neither does the reader. But this woman, when she tells him in few words what he's going through, she says it's a blessing. And use it basically for something good. Make me that promise. And he remembers her scent, and he touches her gold cross. And she kisses him. She gives him a kiss. Again, this strange woman appears out of nowhere. And then when his father comes back, and now he seems to be at peace with what's happening to him. This little 12-year-old kid, and his father says, "You're going to be blind. You're going to." And he's taking it pretty well. And the father's actually rather surprised about what's happening here.
And he tells them, don't worry about those turtles in the sewer. They'll grow up and be fine. No, not really.
Do not worry about those turtles in the sewer. But this is where he is, he's in bad shape. Now he's about to be in worse shape. And let me get this here. We're skipping some parts in here. And then he goes home, right, Tim? He decides to go home. Now, the thing is, though, his brownstone, I believe, was it in Manhattan? The one that was blown up, Tim?
See, I always think it's Hell's Kitchen, but I don't know that's where he patrolled, but I never really thought about where he lived. I wonder if it is Hell's Kitchen. Okay. I don't know.
But it's a really nice place, right? I mean, you have to have some money, right?
Oh, thanks to YouTube and me seeing apartments in New York and then seeing what he's walking around in. Holy crap.
He goes back home to where he was born, Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah.
In basically a working class area. So he goes back home. And now his home is gone. It's no longer there. His parents' home. It's been demolished, but he wonders if the gym is still there. And he begins to think of everything, about his life, how his father didn't want him to be a fighter,
Yeah.
He made a promise to his father that he wouldn't be, but basically he broke that promise. And then this beautiful panel here. This always gets me. This juxtaposition. You
Let me
have
put
him.
you on solo.
You have him being in the punching bag there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's juxtaposed with Karen. And then you see this woman. Then you see a cross. And you see Matt. And then you turn the page and you have the Pieta, the famous one where Mary's holding her son.
Yeah.
And
are you familiar with the significance of that for people who don't know what that is?
well, it's supposed to be the holding the body of her son. You know, I guess when I've been with the cross bell after Mary. This is Mary, not Magdalene.
Yeah.
And holding her son. And I
Michelangelo.
I know it's Michelangelo, I think, who did that famous sculpture of this here. And then you turn the page and the stories, then you see the kingpin here, right? But then the kingpin is there's no corpse. So Matt's still alive. But what you just said earlier, Tim, is just wonderful. I mean, I had not thought about, again, this is something about being in the cave for 3 days. There's no body. And then he appears to the first person he appears is not his friend, his disciples. It's not anyone. It's not his mother. He appears to Magdalene. And, but nevertheless here,
which is a clue that that's his mother.
His mother or something.
This chapter in particular, there's other things going on with Ben and stuff, but this chapter in particular, the first 2 chapters, you have the villain getting the hero, and we're used to the hero coming back and getting the villain, and that doesn't happen. So now we're in the unknown, and we actually are now side by side traveling through this story with Matt. He is now, he's not just the reader's eyes. We're with him because we don't know where this is going to go.
No.
People, this is where we start seeing that this could be a retelling of Christ and the cross and stuff. And it's just amazing. Now we're getting into fathers and mothers. We know about battling Jack.
Yeah.
But now we get the whole story about the mother. If you were a Daredevil fan and a Frank Miller fan, I can imagine people just like on the edge of their seats and dancing on their tiptoes. You follow me?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we start the thing that I pointed out while I was reading it, is that now we get into what makes the hero. It's not the costume. Okay? Because in this issue, as you're going to see, that's a Santa. He's holding a switchblade. You see that Daredevil Matt Murdock has not put on the Daredevil costume. We see that Ben Urich is investigating the cop that said that Matt Murdock took a bribe, and he's at the hospital, and there's a nurse there as the cop is over his son, who the Kingpin is now paying for the medical bills. And this nurse isn't just a nurse. This nurse is a badass hit woman, an assassin, who's keeping an eye on everybody, and she becomes the main antagonist for Ben. Breaks his fingers, tells him the Kingpin said lay off and everything. So just because she's dressed as a nurse, she's not a nurse. These Santa men try to, they pull a switchblade and try to go after Matt. So just because you're dressed like Santa Claus doesn't mean you're Santa Claus. And now Kingpin goes into his next step here pretty soon, where he takes the Daredevil costume, puts it on a thug to ruin the name of Daredevil, now that he's ruined Matt. So it's not the costume that makes the hero. We are seeing Matt being built back up, what it takes to build him back up. And that's why he never became a villain, because inside of him is what drives the Kingpin crazy. There's this goodness. He can't be broke. And he's gone after it as far as you can. So a theme in this is what makes the hero. And I am going to throw in a little line here that in the last 10 years of Marvel and stuff, with all the switching of the heroes and stuff, they need to read this, because you can't just put a costume on somebody and say they're a hero and they earned it. There's no story there.
That's true.
This is why people love Matt. He's a living, breathing person by now. Yeah. Seriously, you start knowing that there's things Matt wouldn't do. If you messed up something in the story, people are going to call you out on it, and they've read enough to where they'll go back to an issue. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're doing here now. That's what I was picking up on.
No, I like that. The way you pointed out is the nurse is someone who heals. Here, the nurse is someone who kills. Santa, yeah, like I said, Santa is one who brings joy. But here you have Santa and basically the Turk.
Matt Murdock dresses up as a devil.
as Satan. Yeah,
There we go.
and yet he does good.
Kingpin is a businessman in a penthouse.
Penthouse, right? But he's almost like an Old Testament God here,
Yeah.
because in the sense that, like in the Old Testament, this is like also a story of Job. Job is put through the ringer by God, just basically. But in the end, Job is still faithful to God. That doesn't break his faith, and so because in the Old Testament, in the God, many of this, I mean, he puts people through pretty bad things sometimes. And the New Testament, though, is the Son, right? Who's just benevolent and kindness, who's loving kindness, as is his mother, and that's what he exemplifies. Just basically love your neighbor, to a degree that maybe most people are not. It's not possible. It's an ideal, a very high bar, and so when we get, I guess, to the next issue, where I like the titles. This one says "Born Again."
Yeah.
And then you open the page and you see him. Is he dying or not? But that's not, like you said about the splash page, is how they connect. Which I hadn't thought about. Is you see this is his nun is praying for him. Yeah. And there's Matt. This is a wonderful scene there by his side. And we see that nun again. Again, not knowing, besides she's a nun. Like why is she important? And all this time, and finally we see Karen. Karen has finally made it to New York. She contacts Foggy. They meet up. Let me get to that page here with Foggy.
Now, there's been stuff going on with Karen here. The person supplying her with heroin has let her, she slept with him to get a hit, and he's like, "You're mine now," and he smacks her around. The pimp hand is strong. So she is more or less an object. There's nothing more to her than being a drug addict at this point, and that's pertaining to the story. So the path for she to be as low as a woman could be, if we serve the story, and Matt to be as down as he is, and now he's got that female influence.
Yeah.
You can see that the path for the two to them is leading to something.
Yeah.
But we'll get there. We'll get there. That's why I just want to point out there's some momentum there that you're going to pick up, which is why a certain moment works so well.
And that moment for me is I said earlier about how Miller and Mazzucchelli seem to portray her in an unsympathetic light.
Yeah.
Not terrible, but to the reader thinking Karen. And then she meets with Foggy.
Yeah. Let me put you on solo again. We'll do comments when you find a place to pause there, but go as long as you want. Yeah.
No, I'll just be brief here. She meets Foggy, and Foggy says, "Well, what have you been up to?" And she's a little bit evasive, but she does tell him what has happened. Now Foggy, she doesn't tell Foggy what she did to Matt. Like that she told his identity. Foggy doesn't know he's Daredevil.
Right.
But then Foggy enlightens her as to what has been happening to Matt, all the terrible things. And then you see this devastation on her face. And she realizes what has happened. And she says, "It's my fault." And he goes, "What do you mean by that? It's your fault." And now you see Karen doing the right thing. She goes, "I'm just going to leave." She's involved with this guy, like you said, this pimp who's beating her. And she doesn't want Foggy to help her because he might hurt Foggy.
Did Foggy end up sleeping with the Irish girlfriend of Matt? I can't remember.
I don't know if at this point they're together. I think they are.
I know he saves her hits somebody with a cannonball to save her. Yeah.
And so they are now at this point, but Foggy, who's just very kind, he goes, "No, your family, Karen, like Matt is family. I'm gonna help you." And then you see this. And so now it's turning around because Karen does the right thing in a sense. So she realizes that that what she did was horrendous.
Accountability is amazing.
Amazing. Yeah. And so now you feel for Karen.
Yeah.
And then you turn the panel and you have this wonderful prayer of this nun. Now, maybe the nun is doing what she's supposed to do. Basically, let me read this part because I really like this part, Tim. And I'm going to read the whole prayer. But she says this, His soul is troubled, but it is a good man's soul, my lord. He needs only to be shown your way. Goes back to Dante. Then he will rise as your own and bring light to the poisoned city. He will be as a spear of lightning in your hand, my lord. And there's the part that gets me. If I am to be punished for past sins, so be it. If I am to be cast into hell, so be it. Now, this goes beyond a simple prayer from a
Right.
nun. But spare him. So many people need him. Hear my plea. This is powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely powerful stuff without knowing who this woman is.
In a comic book, sir. In a comic book. Yeah.
And this got me as a kid. He begins to, her scent, he realizes it's the same woman that appeared to him when she was a child. And we saw in the previous issue in Pariah, who visited him at the hospital, the one he made a promise to.
Yeah.
And the cross, it's the same cross, it's the same woman. And then these lines, Maggie, that's her name is Maggie, are you my mother? And she says, oh,
And
of course not, child. And he realizes her heart skipped a beat. She's lying.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, what? His mother was a nun? I couldn't believe this. This was a complete shock.
See, I went the other way around. I kind of knew it. I don't know how I knew. You know what I mean? Like
you're a smarter reader than I am. I didn't.
I saw it coming. But the thing that got me is I was trying to figure out if he remembered his mother's scent from before he got his powers, and that would be substantial. That smell, that memory of his mother. Did he do that before he got his powers?
No, because remember I think it's in the next issue when Ben Urich has been doing background on Matt, and he goes, Matt said that his mother died at childbirth. So it seems to be that I think at one point she gave up basically any kind of custody, it looks like, over Matt. So I don't think she had any presence in his life prior to him being in the hospital after the canister. That's my understanding. So he had no memory of a mother's scent, which is very strong, for kids.
So I kind of want to review here. I don't want to bog anybody down with psychoanalysis, whatever you want to call it and stuff, but I do got a little bit of a background. And I don't know if this was a design or if this was genius, but real quick, his attitude towards women, like it or not, guys, you are influenced. It just depends who you are, different levels. Could have 1% influence, could have 99% influence, but you are influenced by your relationship with your mother. So Matt becomes a superhero. There's no mother there. The women that he picks and stuff are very intense and stuff because he's filling a void with love and everything like that. All of a sudden, his mother is here. And now this is the first relationship they've actually shown. And I'm including Black Widow, who I prefer him to be with Black Widow and stuff, where it's almost a healthy relationship. There's some repair here with a void that is not in him from not having a mother around. I know we're getting a little Freud in here, but in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's a section there for it. I can go on and on. But anyway, I don't know if this is by design or not. I don't know Frank Miller's background. I don't know if he did this kind of research. Of course, he used Electra, where you have a complex. But now we have the mother coming in to fulfill a spiritual need symbolically. And before this, as I've said, I used the crude term, he's a pussy hound. Now we have our mother here, and instead of going after all the superheroes, he's already bored with the normal Irish girl. And who's coming around the corner? Karen. So finally, after seeing his mother, I think this plays a part in him being healed to be there for somebody. When two people are damaged, neither one nurtures the other. It's toxic. Right. And now all of a sudden he's at his lowest low. And now we get a spirituality and a mother thing going on where a hole is filled. How's that? I don't want to. We'll just leave it there.
No, in the Fantomas comics that I've discussed from my channel, in the sense that Fantomas is a storyline because he always likes to steal
Yeah.
beautiful objects, and also he has all these women in his life, but he's never with one. And eventually, he does go back in time, and he's analyzed by Sigmund Freud. And basically, Freud makes that the connection is the reason you steal all these beautiful things, and you don't know why you do it, is because you lost your mother early on. She disappeared from your life.
Yeah.
Now that's a very, just a very simple way of looking. Not simple, but it's, just um, anyway, it's just a way of looking at it.
Right.
But in a way, this makes sense. It makes perfect sense in the story. Or
It
the way
fits.
Frank Miller changed Daredevil, Matt Murdock. The way when Frank Miller entered this, maybe unconsciously brought this into his storytelling.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
It plays a part. I just don't know if it was on purpose or not, but it's fantastic. It adds to the story.
Yeah.
I had a picture of Ben Urich here just to let people know that he's still going through hell.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're aware of him getting in there. Robertson, yeah, he's getting phone calls, and we get closer and closer shots. And Ben Urich looks more and more stressed as people are coming after him, telling him to quit. And I just want to point out that the storytelling is fantastic because of these panels of how the pressure is getting to Ben Urich and how they're threatening him, and how that nurse has already I think she's broke his fingers by now.
Broke his fingers, yes.
Yeah. So I think that kind of covers 230 here, unless there's something else you can think of. I'm going to do these comments real quick.
Sure, let's go to the comments.
Yeah. All right. Sorry to be moving a little fast, Gore. You slow me down if you need to.
No, we're good.
All right. Palo's all over this. I couldn't square this Karen with Annivesary later did with her. Or maybe he meant I couldn't stand. Anyway,
I know you like Annivesary run. I like it too, but it's different. This is anyway.
She behavioral demands of Matt. Yeah, Annivesary, Frank Miller, polar opposites, guys. I'm going to let you know. I mean, even though they're both.
Yeah.
Karen never felt any guilt for what she did to Matt, but she blames him for why she fell on hard time. Annivesary was more about social issues, and we know what Frank Miller is more about.
Here she does blame herself. Here it's very clear, as we learned, that she completely blames for what happened, and Miller makes it very clear in this one.
I think in the long term she didn't feel any guilt, like it was here in the story. But I was going to comment on what happens in the next 3 issues and where this finally. You'll see. I think I kind of agree with Palo if he's talking after this story was over.
Yeah, what happens with how Innocenti approaches it. Yeah.
Pocan Joe, it's a very cool story. Never been a huge Daredevil fan, but I did enjoy this story. This is one of those classic top 20 stories of all time in comics, I think.
This is one I recommend for Daredevil.
Yeah.
I just read this book and see if you like
Magic Kelly had a very postmodernist, dirty, and mundane take on Lepita. Okay. What do you think about his style? Miller claims he didn't help with any of the layouts. I don't know. This chapter that we just read is very Miller-like with layouts. So, and Crack is here. Good morning, Crack.
Hey, Terrence.
Yeah. All right. So, 231, where we get more into what I was saying here about what makes a hero. It's not the costume. Something that's completely lost on a lot of people these days. Yeah, absolutely. Go for it, Gore. You're smiling. You're feeling good about this one. I can feel it.
This was is at this point, like you alluded to before. Okay, Ben Urich. Regarding Ben, the police officer was being basically not blackmailed. The Kingpin was saying, "I'm gonna help save your son if you do this to Matt Murdock." The son dies.
Correct.
The son dies in the hospital. And now the man wants to tell the story, the police officer, Ben Urich. That nurse, the paradox of the nurse, who's an assassin, basically, when she realizes this, and Ben Urich and the police officer are walking towards the parking lot, and the man says, "I'm going to tell you my story." How basically it was all made up. Matt didn't do these things. the nurse does two things. She gets Ben Urich's hand, which is used for his writing, for his profession, breaks the fingers, and tells him, my employer, without mentioning the kingpin, is not happy with what you're doing. But then she basically nearly kills the police officer. She doesn't kill him, but she tortures him in a way that traumatizes Ben Urich to make him forget the name Matt Murdock, to make him forget his own principles as a journalist. And then later on, the nurse kills the man when he's in the hospital room. The man's on the phone with Ben Urich. She comes in, crushes his larynx, and Ben Urich listens to this. Well, he's in the newsroom. And like you saw that panel of his face being terrified by this. And then the crust comes basically when Ben Urich decides to, finally, he says, no, I'm going to write the story. The nurse basically goes to his home, nearly kills his wife. But at this point, Matt shows up. Matt shows up because what Matt is doing, he's back on his path. He's back on his path to basically, let's say for redemption, so to speak.
All the stories are dovetailing together.
He had a spiritual crisis in the sense that the kingpin was very close to being successful, to crushing him spiritually and killing him. But he's born again, resurrected. At an unconscious level, has a lot to do with Maggie, the woman who appeared to him when he was just a child of 12 years old. He made a promise to. And then she's back. And at this point, it's not addressed. You get to the next issue is he's going to think about a weaker writer would have gone over the fact, is this my mother, with all these thought bubbles? Oh, I miss my mother.
Gotcha.
Oh, my father. Why didn't he tell me? Forget that. Forget that nonsense. We don't need to be told this. We feel for Matt. Now we're thinking, he's not addressing it, but it doesn't matter. We know it. Matt knows it. So Foggy is now looking after Karen, but the pimp comes back. The assassins come back. The Daredevil, the Kingpin, because the King, like you said, it's brilliant. The Kingpin thinks he's already destroyed Matt Murdock. Now he wants to destroy Daredevil by having this lunatic from an insane asylum dressed up as Daredevil kill Karen, kill Foggy. That's his plan. But he's foiled by, like you said, the man. Not the man in the costume, but he's foiled by the man, Matt Murdock. He foils him. Now, all this time, he doesn't know Karen's around until he hears all these gunshots. And he realized Karen is there. Karen doesn't know Matt's around. This is wonderful in the story, where the reader knows that they're both together, but they don't realize that they know that the characters don't know.
Much like a guardian angel, if you will.
Oh, I like that. He is. Yes, he is in the guardian angel because he's on basically, he's right up, basically, literally in the heavens.
We're in sync on this right here. You brought up what I was going to bring up. They don't know. See,
they don't know.
Foggy told us, Foggy already told a story before about where initiation to a fraternity on college campus, he had to crawl through a pipe, and he came out, and mysteriously a guy holding a water hose was on a third floor window tied up with the hose. He was going to drown Foggy. He said Matt did it, but he never admitted it. He was in the pipe. So he's always looking over people. Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
And then we get to Matt. You basically is here. The pimp is coming. There's people trying to kill her. And she wants to protect Foggy. And she knows Foggy's going to risk his life for her. She's not going to let him do that. So she hits him over the head. Again, this is, Karen being a good person throughout this. She's not going to let him. She's going to basically, this is her undoing. She's responsible for this. She runs out. She runs into the pimp who's been shot. And she's basically going to have one last fix. The pimp's about to shoot her. And one of her last words is Matt. And I think she says, Matt, I love you. Yes, I love you, Matt. That's one of her last words before she thinks she's about to shoot up. But then Matt arrives. And this wonderful scene. You turn the page. You don't need any words.
Yeah.
This does it all right there.
People need to burn. They need to burn this image in their memory because this turns up in the sequel of all places years later.
This is Mazzucchelli grief on a page, grief and happiness all intertwined. This panel here does it all.
Yeah,
absolutely stunning work.
That's an iconic comic book page. That is iconic
page. And then when you turn the page and we get to the penultimate issue, which is going to be God and Country, when you jump into it, when we meet him again, here she is.
So I got a question here, right? Mm-hmm. Let me make sure I'm looking at these right. These last two, 232, 233.
Yes.
We're going to go ahead and say that Murdoch returns to being Daredevil. There's an iconic page you'll get to. I'm sure.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But we have the Avengers popped in and stuff. Did Born Again? Do you think Born Again stopped right where you were at, and now we're back into the superhero world?
Yeah, Yes, I think I thought about I think so. I think the superhero world does detract a little bit from this, a little bit. And because up until this point, you don't see any suits.
It's been it's been a crime story, a slice of life story, living, breathing people, religious themes, what makes a man, characters and stuff. Now the costumes are coming back, the government conspiracy, the Avengers. And he does make a presentation of an iconic shot, another one that some people do consider iconic, of Daredevil's proper return. So did it end there, or is this just two issues? This has been a discussion over the years. People have just went ahead and accepted this as part of Born Again. It originally wasn't. I don't think.
I agree, because you see these panels here, the opening pages.
Yeah.
Matt is now helping Karen detox.
Yeah.
And then you turn the page and you have another beautiful page. She's told him everything. She's told him what he's done. But Matt says, I've lost nothing. And without Miller having to explain this, what do you mean? Miller doesn't have to remind us he's lost his brownstone. Miller doesn't have to remind us he's lost his law license. Miller doesn't have to remind us he's lost all his money. Miller doesn't have to remind us that he's been publicly shamed, Matt Murdock, his vanity, all those things. He goes, I've lost nothing, because those don't matter. Yeah. And he's holding Karen. And without him saying, I forgive you, he forgives her. And it's all said here and these few words there without being stated with the words that I just used. It's absolutely brilliant.
Would you like to know the song that comes to my head when I see this part of the story?
Yeah, what is it, Tim?
If I was a carpenter and you were my lady, would you marry me anyway? Would you have my baby? For some reason, I start hearing that in the background, acoustic. I don't know if it's Johnny Cash, Robert Plant. I just hear the song,
Oh, it was a carpenter. I think is that Cat Stevens? I think it might be. Is it Cat Stevens?
So many people's done it. I forget who originally did it, but it's better than Eve of Destruction from the 60s. But anyway, I digress.
But this is it, Tim. You have this image, and years later, after I read the Divine Comedy, and I did a video about this, I had read St. Augustine's Confessions. And St. Augustine was a 4th century a priest, and who had basically been a pagan before he became a Christian. But there's a wonderful part in his Confessions where he talks about how his mother basically helped a lot with his spiritual redemption. And again, when I read this, I thought of the Born Again stories. And how important these women have been to Matt. Also, his father. This is not denigrate his father. But what he does here, because we've always known the importance of battling Jack to Daredevil. But now we get this importance really with women. But of course, we got some of that with Elektra. And then you get this, an incredible cover. of this. But I think at this point, like I think I like your point of Born Again in a way ends, and then we get into a really good superhero story, but it's something else.
Yeah. So what I think happens going on here is that we get introduced to Nuke. Now that's interesting because it's the 80s, Cold War, nuclear war. We were actually a little coming out of that finally, just a touch. I was there as a kid. But what we think of started here is that we have the rise of Matt Murdock, and now we're seeing the fall of the Kingpin, where he is going nuclear to take out Matt Murdock because he methodically went after him. Now he's bringing out the nukes. He's going to blow it all up now. He's willing to blow it all up to go after him. Now, and I'm going to step back and let you do the review here and stuff again. You know what I'm saying? But my problem is anytime I see anything to do with pills with this, what this is that Nuke is the only survivor. Now, listen to this. He's the only survivor of trying to do another super soldier program. They have another name for it. But he has to take pills, and he's not in reality with us mentally and stuff, right? There's a book called Akira that I'm finally on the 5th volume of. I'm finally going to finish it all the way. I read 80% of it, we'll say, right? And, Frank Miller was highly, highly influenced by Lone Wolf and Cub for Ronin and some other manga stuff and the ninjas. I think we have a little bit of an Akira influence here.
Oh,
I don't know. I'll just kind of throw that out there before we continue there,
I've never read the Akira books.
Oh, okay.
I know about them, though.
Yeah, we can move on. I mean, it's just a touch of an Akira. There's pills that they take. There's a project that Akira was part of, Neo Tokyo. It's almost like Nuke is living in that world. And this is where Captain America kind of takes over in a little bit here because of this character.
Basically, what's happened is, to Tim's point, is that the Kingpin is now getting fed up. He knows Matt Murdock is alive, but he needs to bring him out. So he brings a man that's being used by the U.S. government for shenanigans in Central America, like in Nicaragua. And again, definitely during the Cold War, the Sandinistas and such. But he brings him to New York, even though it's very risky. Because this man is a patriot, so he sees the enemies of the United States, and through basically manipulation with these pills. And the Kingpin's going to take advantage of that. So he brings him out, lets him loose, brings mayhem in Hell's Kitchen to bring out Matt Murdock. And it works. And what basically unleashes Matt is when he blows up where Karen, where his place, his current apartment, and Matt finds Karen. Yeah, she's holding his costume, and he was going to wait. He was going to wait to come out. He was going to wait, and then the picture what you alluded to earlier, Tim, the iconic one, is the paradox. Yeah, the paradox is of the devil of Lucifer. Now he's going to be the savior. Born again, reborn in fire. Where have we seen that before? Hell's Kitchen. So anyway, Tim, take it away.
Oh, that's fine. I think you touched on basically what's going on here, because basically we're seeing the aftermath of the healing, the forgiveness. He doesn't even question forgiving his mom. We had Karen be as low as she can be, and what happens? Matt, she absolves herself. I guess it's a Catholic thing to confess. And that's basically what she's doing.
Yeah, that's right. It is.
And Matt, and through all this healing and going from pariah to apocalypse to, reborn again and everything like that, he comes out stronger in the end. And we see this as the Kingpin is devolving into, an obsession with killing the guy. We got Matt Murdock cleaning himself up, and we got Karen clinging to something besides heroin. And
I like that.
Stuff. Yeah,
I like that.
She's clinging to the costume of Daredevil, and that's the thing. I'm never real clear what that is. Like I told you, when I read Alan Moore and things, I feel like everything means something, but not everything means a lot. I feel like this means something. I haven't got there yet where it's at. I
don't know. Maybe it has to do. Remember when Captain America in that story, he's talking to a general,
Yeah.
And the general's talking about God and country or something, and he says,
Yeah.
"I hold on to the dream."
Yeah.
I guess
We're based. Yeah. Yeah. We're getting to the American dream. We're getting into,
what the U.S. represents, all the positive things the U.S. represents, and certainly in the ideals, the way Cap looks at it. And with her is that costume, right? But the thing is, Matt's always been a protector, but also as Daredevil.
Yeah. And he's a fry cook now at a diner.
That's another thing. Again, when she says because she says I cost you everything. He goes, I've lost nothing, including the idea of vanity.
Yeah.
I mean, here's a man who's been disbarred, working at washing dishes. You have to basically sense it doesn't matter what other people think about me. It's what I think basically about myself,
Yeah.
and those that I care about.
So,
That takes a lot. That takes a lot, because public shaming is some of the worst things. I mean,
yeah.
or feeling if you don't want people know about certain things, about all this, or if you were up here, now you're down here, and it's tough to do. But again, he's born again in the sense of what matters in this life. What matters in this life is, again, he cares for Karen, for Foggy, and he basically realizes the Kingpin really. We all have those things in us, Tim, and where we're tested by something, and it unleashes all these things. But are we going to let ourselves be controlled by the bitterness, the unfairness that we see it in life, the injustices in life? Some people are. Some people cannot let it go. How many times have you heard? I'm sure you've heard this in your profession. I've heard this a lot. Is I went through difficulties, so they should too. No one gave me a handout. They don't deserve a handout. And they say it with bitterness, with anger, or someone they care about who went through that. And they go, they never did that, so they shouldn't either. Now, in the New Testament, that's very unchristian, because Christ never did that. And Matt here with Karen, he's got every single reason to be angry at her. Doesn't come across at all.
Right.
At all here. At all.
At the beginning of the story, going back to that prequel I was showing you, that's actually where Matt kind of is, with that thought you're talking about. That's the Matt. What they ended up doing was completely revamping this book through story to the point you didn't even notice. Okay. Which is just fantastic. And through all this characterization and making Matt again more human than he was in the Silver Age.
More human.
Yeah. I mean, just more human. I mean, it's what it gets to. We have, I love this name, William F. Buckley. I have Gore, Vidal, and William F. Buckley, man. What could
my old rival.
Yeah. I think Frank Miller draws with music, and its influence his drawings. Brian Bolland does that. He listens to Frank Zappa. I can't listen to a lot of Frank Zappa because I think Frank Zappa is a dick as a human being. So I don't want to take my Bolland.
You mean Brian Bolland, when he draws, he listens to music?
Supposedly he's a huge Frank Zappa fan, and
a lot of people like Zappa. Yeah,
tons of albums that he listens to.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty funny. Okay, I didn't know that.
Also, I mean, I can listen to Frank Zappa, but I mean, if I go too far with him, the guy was a dick. I mean, it's this person. Frank Zappa is the kind of guy, in my mind, that if you're going to be friends with him or try to be around him, you got to accept he's a dick. It's not at you personally; it's just him.
Well, I know Moon Zappa wrote a memoir a couple of years ago, and she was pretty critical about her father based on interviews that I saw with her. Continue, Tim.
Oh yeah, sorry. John Austin inspiration. That's probably talking about Akira, I believe. I think. I mean, I'm reaching there. I don't know. I'm about to finish.
It was a very influential work. I just haven't read it, but it's a well-regarded work.
Still can't believe it's been 40 years. Oh,
neither can I.
The 50 years with Crisis is what's messing with me, sir. Yeah. Wait a minute, is it 50 yet? No, 40.
No, not yet, Tim. Not yet. That day will come. That day will come.
Yeah. I thought is meant to comfort of the symbolism of the tragic hero versus the real person behind the symbol. That fits in with what makes a hero. You know what I mean? Is the man, not the costume, the man. I'm gonna have to think about what you're saying there, Joe. I think we're on the same track here. Oh yeah, it. I thought it meant the comfort of the symbolism of the tragic hero versus the real person behind the symbol. Maybe she feels like there's an intimate part there of Matt where he doesn't get to show everybody because of the secret identity thing. You know what I mean?
I don't
Like,
know. He showed it with Elektra, though. Again, we stick just to Miller. And,
yeah.
he showed it with
Yeah.
Elektra how passionate and intimate it could be.
All right, so we'll wind this thing up if you want. So we got Daredevil back, and this is pretty straightforward. We have we have the Avengers show up. The Kingpin went from being methodical. This story takes place, I think, over a year, guys. You know what I mean? David Musichelli draws an awesome Thor up in that corner, man. Yeah, I would have killed for a Musichelli Thor book, but Kingpin has gone from being methodical to just outright very loud. I mean, when he attacks Matt is leaving the diner, and a helicopter comes down in the middle of the street of Hell's Kitchen, and the guy jumps out with an M16 or something.
A lot of weaponry, yeah.
Yeah. So he comes out there. There's all this fight. It's so loud now. He went from methodical to loud. Yeah, absolutely. Taken down in New York. I'm going to put you on solo while I talk.
You talk to him. I'll go through the pages.
Yeah. So, and what happens is that we're back in the superhero world. Of course, we got like a Rambo kind of type guy. We've got government conspiracy going on, but they got loud. He went from methodical to loud, where he couldn't be touched. And now we got the Kingpin. It's the old, we're going to use a bazooka to take out a fly. So that tells you the state of mind that the Kingpin is in because he can't take him down.
Tim, tell me just what happens here. Look, what does Matt Murdock do? When this happens, there's something interesting that happens here.
What page are you on, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I'm ahead of it. I'm ahead of something here. I'm sorry. Keep on, Tim. I'm sorry.
No, because I was going to fly through this part. Forgive me, and it blows up.
It comes later. I'm sorry. Continue.
Oh, he says no more. And he takes down the helicopter because it's killing innocents.
That's right. That happens later, right? When at one point Daredevil, because it's terrible, he takes down a helicopter, even though there's somebody in there, and he kills him.
And he says, "Forgive me." He's talking about forgiveness. He believes. Basically, the guy's found his faith again. Is what we're getting at here. If I absolve myself from my sins and forgive myself, he doesn't hesitate. He knows he has to do it. He knows he can be forgiven. I guess. I thought
I think he does that out of necessity. But this is something new, Tim. Because Nuke is just destroying. He's killing a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so, and then to make matters worse, because this happens later. This happens when Nuke escapes and he's taken down by Captain America, in part. But then people are after Nuke as well, and they shoot him. It gets pretty nasty. I guess it's the panel. Which one is it here?
I told you before we went on air, I have a criticism of the story, and now we're in an area that I criticize it because it is so far removed from Born Again. It is so spectacular now. I begin to think we went a little political about Reagan's 80s. You know what I mean?
But he did that. He did that with Dark Knight Returns. He did that a lot there.
But it kind of kills me. We it's called God and Country. And he went from God to country. So he tried to tie it together with a title. Okay. But I think this is just sort of like, we kind of abandoned what Born Again was just to show where Matt is at. You know what I mean? I guess
it's a very good superhero story.
Yeah.
But I mean, if he had just stuck with what he was doing without having to introduce Nuke or something like that, it probably would have been better, but so be it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is what it is, but it gets so loud that Captain America, if I skip ahead, you jump in anytime. But, when it comes to the ending, I just kind of rush through it because, it's not Born Again anymore in my eyes. But basically, Nuke says a few things that Captain America gets suspicious. Captain America gets on a computer. He's able to figure out some passwords and codes, and he finds out that this is part of a super soldier program where I'm like, this is a Kira influence in my eyes about the project. And this is the only survivor where they were trying to make another super soldier. So this is Captain America if he was created in the 80s with the pills and stuff and the flag on his face. Just because you carry the flag of in America doesn't mean you're a patriot.
Right.
And we're back with that theme of what makes a hero. It's not the costume. It's not symbols. Now it's not a flag. You're not an American if you're waving the flag.
That's right.
Yeah. So now it shifts to Captain America, and then he's going to be the one to kind of put a bow on this. And then after this, I get the feeling Marvel didn't know where to go with Daredevil. There wasn't a plan after this. Yeah. So yeah, continue with what you have there. That's where I kind of.
This is like the last few pages of the book where he takes the body to Ben Urich. This is going to be a major news story at this point,
Yeah.
discussing the whole program, discussing what Kingpin has done. Because basically, we have a reverse of fortune here.
Yes.
Basically, where now the Kingpin himself, who now it's all been it's been documented that he was behind all this. He was behind Nuke. And then we find a redemption about that Matt Murdock was set up. And so now, and obviously Fisk is not happy about this at all. And then we get, it is a little rushed towards the end, but what makes me happy is the last page. Is it okay if I show it, Tim?
Absolutely. I've got you on solo for that very purpose.
This is the final part of the story. But before that, though, when he puts on his costume to go after Nuke one more time, Nuke has basically destroyed much of the area.
Yeah.
First, we see Maggie, we see Foggy, we see Glory, but they barely acknowledge Matt. And they're talking, and there's only a few words between Matt and Karen, but we see the love for each other. We see the devotion already there for each other. You don't have to have many words. He will put on the costume. There's Karen and Matt in the shadows. I like how they're just in the shadows. He puts on the costume to basically take down Nuke, if possible, with help of Captain America. Nuke's fate, Kingpin's fate, and then the final page of the story.
Yeah.
You see Karen and Matt walking down the street of Hell's Kitchen.
Now, check this out. Okay. He's in red and blue, the colors of a hero, but the color of Daredevil, the red. What is Karen wearing?
Bingo. Beautiful.
All in white.
All in
reborn
white.
Again in white.
Yeah.
See, down this way, we would talk baptism. I don't know what Catholics would call it,
I don't know, but certainly, basically, if the previous issue was called God and Country, and when Captain America says, I have the dream, again, the dream of what the positive aspects that the U.S. represents versus the negative aspects, which is Nuke and the shenanigans in Central America interfering in those things.
Yeah.
And also human experiments like they do on Nuke, but as they did on Captain America. But you have this wonderful part, and just a few words, and it's Matt Murdock talking, and he says, my name is Matt Murdock. I was blinded by radiation. My remaining senses function with superhuman sharpness. I live in Hell's Kitchen and do my best to keep it clean. That's all you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
The end.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant the way this ends. And I don't know when it was, but I read or saw an interview with Frank Miller, and where he talked about this story with Karen and with Matt, and the happy ending here for them too, is that he said he wanted to bring Matt Murdock some happiness. And I don't think, though, he acknowledged, though, that he had been responsible in part for bringing Matt Murdock so much grief with his wonderful stories. But he wanted to bring him some happiness at last. And with that page, and that's what he does. But like you alluded to earlier, I think someone in the comments did earlier, is so Frank Miller does this story, walks away, and oh my goodness, the writer is going to follow up on this. What are you going to do now?
Yeah.
And so what are you going to do now? And like Paulo mentioned it when Innocenti took over. And I mean, I liked what Innocenti did, but that's the thing is, though, this is in a way is something that is so unique because of the writing and the artwork, how they work so well together. It's a story with a wonderful beginning with an end that even the writing of anything afterwards is going to be very difficult to basically parallel this in some way. And
well, I'll let you know it was very weak what they did.
Yeah.
The next 3 issues that followed this, and I'm going by memory here, but I don't remember when Annivesary actually came on.
No, she came in later. You're right. They are weak. What came afterwards?
So what happened was that we had a bunch of writers and different teams come on. The next 3 issues had nothing to do with Born Again. They didn't have anything to do with each other. One was a Madcap story with Klaus Janson and Steve Ditko.
Yeah, Ditko was on.
A story about Mr. Hyde that I don't remember who did, but it turns out Mr. Hyde was going to get cured, but Daredevil accidentally stops him from taking the formula, not knowing it would have been a permanent cure. A Claw story. Art Adams covers, Charles Vest covers, 1 issue where Todd McFarlane draws it. And then around 248, I think is when 248 is where I think it finally started picking up again. This is signed by Rick Leonardi. And they have a Wolverine thing to get us going. And then it goes into Fall of Mutants, and Annivesary finally like starts getting her thing. And it's all a bunch of 60s stuff like anti-nukes.
Yeah,
and,
they're very
there's a lot of hippie stuff in there, which leads to a little known sequel to Born Again. Then do you not know about it? That's fine. It ran from 297 to the 300th issue, and I ended up reading it backwards. This is the 300th issue I bought off the newsstand when it came out in 91, I think. But basically, this was what it was all about. They waited about 5 years, I believe, to go ahead and build up to the 300th issue, where you wouldn't know this was Born Again, the sequel, because he opens up with The Kingpin by Lee Weeks. And there's like a lot of stuff going on with those Annivesary issues. You know, some good stuff in there. I was collecting it at the time, you know. And now we have like the Daredevil. It's like Born Again never happened. The Daredevil's like, hey, what's up, Willie? Looking at him.
Yeah, he calls him Willie.
Yeah.
They're annoying. Yeah.
And I figured out after reading this backwards, and I read the 300th issue, I was like, oh, they undid Born Again because he takes out the Kingpin again. But this time it's like permanent. Kingpin is sleeping with Typhoid Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And Lee Weeks has done some great stuff here. I was a Typhoid Mary fan. I was really that character was fantastic. Mm-hmm. But in the rerun, we got them fighting in the rain. They redo Elektra is what they're doing, and they do give us a pose from.
Yeah, that's a bit. Yeah, they ripped off that page.
So basically, just to wrap it up, Shield becomes involved. Nick Fury becomes involved. It's very contrived, and they're just rushing to the issue 300 to have the Kingpin took down by Daredevil, so he wins.
It's rough writing. It's rough writing on that.
Here's my deal. I think Jim Shooter was gone. Jim Shooter had a thing where your story better make sense when you bring it to me, which is why he allowed Frank Miller to kill Elektra when he wanted to. He said, tell me the story. He put his face down because Elektra was a hit, and Frank said, I have to kill her. He set Frank down. Frank told him the story. He said, go ahead. Jim Shooter's out of the picture. And I think the decline of Marvel creatively like that really left when nobody was holding creators to the fire. And I think this is a perfect example of that. Born Again, in a place where we make deadlines, our books come out on time. Ralph Macchio's learned lessons. Like I said at the beginning, Walt Simonson did an amazing thing on Thor because he was inspired by Frank Miller Daredevil. Ralph Macchio was letting Frank do what he wanted creatively with Born Again. And then all of a sudden we get this, a cash grab. 300th issue, let's tie it back, and they undo everything, more or less, character-wise. So thank goodness that we have physical copies that we can hold on to and have the story preserved. It's in trade. And here's what's funny. I didn't watch the Netflix series of Daredevil. I made it through about the first 6 episodes of season 1. Mm-hmm. But I thought in the 3rd season, they did Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil and Born Again in the 3rd season. And now in March, Disney's coming out with Daredevil Born Again.
I heard what it's called. I don't know what they're going to do, though. It's not going to be this story. I can't imagine it being this story. Yeah. And I cannot imagine that they would do that.
What we got here? I'm sorry, man. A bunch of comments came in at once. Let me see what happened here. But otherwise, this was fantastic. This is a great story. I always do this. I end up appreciating things a bit more after we do these things. With your thoughts and stuff. Yeah.
No, the writing on those last write stories is rough, and I'm just surprised they decided to even go back to the story at all.
It
Which
just needs to be acknowledged. I think it just needs to be
yeah,
acknowledged. There's a sequel out there. You can make up your own mind, but I think we're both in agreement. I don't even want to review it. I just wanted to. Lee Weeks, bless his heart. Lee Weeks, the artist, did what he could.
but he could, and the seduction of using a strong writer like Miller would have made the seduction of Typhoid Mary by Matt as a means to get her captured. He sleeps with her so that she'll be captured.
In the rain.
And
He went Electra with her.
he went Electra with her. Then he purposely has sex with her so that her personality will shift, and then she'll be put in an insane asylum.
I had no idea you read this story.
So that's just it. That's one of the things I remember. That I'm thinking, what is this? And then again, a stronger writer like Miller could have done a story like that, but with his writing, his very good writing from this period, he would have made it very convincing.
Yeah.
Here, Matt doesn't seem like just doesn't work, and the fact that he keeps calling the Kingpin Willie, it's just he's almost very flippant about it. The thing is, for those of us who've read Miller, it makes it very difficult afterwards to just say, okay, we want to. It's not really fair to these writers from my end. It's not really is.
They're living in the shadow of it's Alan Moore on Swamp Thing. You're living in the shadow.
I mean, Bendis and Brubaker came pretty close because I like Bendis and Brubaker what they did with Daredevil in the 2000s, but it's been tough to replicate something like that.
I can only handle Bendis when he writes street level characters, crime stories, cops. So I need to check out. I think I read 2 issues of the first 2 issues he did of Daredevil. I'm willing to go back and look at those because
I like them. I like them a lot.
So Comic Crat said, Miller did the high bar. Paolo, you can't be born again and okay, thank you. Born again in Catholicism. I think it's Baptist. I think you're baptized.
No, he incorporates the Protestant part with the Catholic part. But born again here is symbolic because it's not about Christian faith here. It's about born again, basically his character. It's basically what this is. Yeah.
No second baptism. I got it. Yep. I did 6 page papers in 6 weeks. No joke. 666 on different. Each one was a different religion. I found Lutheran to be Protestants blew my mind because it's daddy issues apparently by the founder. But the Lutheran thing, I really wanted that. I was like, I need to find a Lutheran church around here. Take out the guilt. Anyway, wait a second. You mean a superhero, big 2 comic tread territory they had already covered in the past and it sucked? I'm stunned. Going into the 90s, sir. Yeah, it was foreshadowing the future. Oh, that's great. He was right on it. He didn't even have to think. I got a feeling Crack didn't even have to think. Was there ever a what if regarding Born Again? I have my Daredevil box is here somewhere. There's a what if that Frank Miller wrote and drew called What If Elektra Had Lived.
Okay, I read that one, but I don't remember the story though.
I don't think Born Again's been touched too much except for like Kevin Smith. A lot of people like Guardian Devil that he did in the 90s under Marvel Knights. But I had that, and he had characters. They weren't talking like you and I and real people. They were giving speeches every panel to the point that even one of the characters said, "Nice speech," and then gave a speech of his own while he was talking. I didn't like Kevin Smith's run. I thought Kevin Smith could do better.
Let's address that. If you don't mind, Tim, let's address that issue. If you go after we go to the comments.
Oh, yes, okay. JP Fond, Jim Shooter keeping it straight. Yeah. I think that's a big part of what happened. Yes, Paolo, exactly right.
Well, Jim Shooter didn't love the Love and War. When Miller because after this, he was going to do Love and War, the Vanessa story with the Kingpin. And him and Sienkiewicz had done the work, but they were hiding the pages from Jim Shooter. But Chris Claremont told Shooter about the pages. Shooter saw the pages and says, this can't be put in continuity. And that's when he says, this stood under the epic line, under the graphic novel. And that's the reason Love and War was published as a graphic novel.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that cover.
This is so wild that this is setting here. I had a pipe bust, so I had to get stuff up.
I have that figure. I have that figure up right up there, and it vibrates. It's very grim. He vibrates.
Absolutely. This is what I believe Frank Miller was doing when they were trying to do Born Again 2. You know what I mean? That's ironic that was sitting there. Well, for people watching, this Marvel Age number 36 has a 3 or 4 page interview with Frank Miller's return to Daredevil in 85 and 86. Yeah. And then if you want to know about the 300th issue spectacular, they have little excerpts from everybody that's worked on Daredevil they could get a hold of.
Oh, that should be interesting.
And yeah, and it's cool. You know, they all have a little
I like
something to say about it. This is number 106 of Marvel Age. I pulled these out last night and flipped through them. Go ahead.
Regarding Kevin Smith, I'd been out of comics for a long time, but in the 2000s, I began buying the trades for the Bendis Brubaker stuff, and I had them. They were all sitting there, and even before then, it was with the Kevin Smith stuff, right, with Quesada's artwork. So one day I decided to read them. I did not know, Tim, that Karen was dead. I did not know she had been killed. So I'm reading this thing.
Another reason I didn't like it, I saw it coming. Yeah,
I saw this thing and I go, hey, it's Karen. Okay. So I'm reading it. Bullseye appears. And, those of you, I'm sorry you haven't read this, but what happens is Bullseye kills her. Although I think most people here are familiar with it. And I was shocked, because I kept thinking of, this.
Yeah.
And now Karen is dead. And he's killed by Bullseye, and I did not like it, and it bugged me.
It's all about trying to put your character through hell, and they're in the shadow of Miller. How do you top the death of Elektra? Why even try?
But then a couple of years ago, I came across Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's Daredevil Yellow, and I couldn't find it in time for this stream.
Okay.
But I did a video on the comics. Those of you who have not read Daredevil Yellow by Loeb and Sale, it takes place after her death. I think it's the anniversary of Karen's death, and Daredevil is mentally writing a love letter to her. Oh. And it's beautiful because it's just how they met when she applied for the job to be a secretary there, a legal secretary for Murdoch and Nelson. And how they fell in love. It's wonderful it's wonderfully painful. And Loeb and Sale have done the same thing in Spider-Man Blue, where on the anniversary of the death of Gwen Stacy, Peter goes to an attic and records a speech to Gwen. And all this time, Mary Jane knows about it. But Mary Jane isn't jealous about it. She is a witness to his pain of a woman that he loved before he loved Mary Jane. So those creators have done something wonderful with it in Spider-Man Blue and Daredevil Yellow.
So Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, of course, did Superman for All Seasons, but they also had a few little short stories that tied into it that popped up elsewhere in DC, right? And
I've never read that.
This collects all of them. And I just want people to know that they snuck in Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy.
Oh, that's cute. That's sweet. I like that.
So,
yeah.
See, this is what happens when I talk to people. You'll say something, my memory pops, those CDs.
I didn't know about that book, Tim.
Yeah.
Glad you told me about it.
But I need to wind this up because of my pipe. I need to go get a shot back. I have enjoyed this thoroughly. Thank you for your patience. Letting me get centered again. For people who don't know, I woke up to a pond in my downstairs.
Yeah.
And it was starting to come into the comic book room, but we still have a lot of stuff to clean up. We cleaned up this morning for the show, and Gore centered me. He helped center me,
Oh. No, before we go, I just wanted to, I mentioned this to Tim earlier, is one, Tim, I'm very grateful that we're doing this together. And
I'm enjoying it. It's been my pleasure. Yeah.
I like this a lot. But another reason I think this is good that we're doing this is that sometimes people do these type of shows after a creator dies.
Yeah.
And instead of, honoring their work, respecting their work while they're still living. And we know we discussed Alan Moore in the past, and now we're discussing Miller. And I think it's important to acknowledge these people while they're still with us.
Yeah.
And because instead of doing a retrospective, after they're dead, is to just, discuss their work now. And those of you, there's a gallery edition of Born Again that's available. It's a beautiful piece of work.
I'll put you on solo.
Yeah, this is the trade. and you see all the beautiful majesty of it, and all the, everything is here. And I've done it again in my channel. I've done a video showing it, but there's many videos about the gallery edition, which I highly recommend. It's under $30. I think it's rather affordable. And Miller was on a roll all this time because he was doing that. He was doing, Love and War, which Electra Assassin, and the Kingpin story. And then, of course, Batman Year One.
Electra Assassin, I could not make it through that because of the hyper violence and hyper tension of the artwork with Miller's story. It's the only thing I've ever read that was too much for my senses. But I mean, I highly recommend it also, is what I'm trying to get at. It's an experience.
My favorite.
I got to tell Bill Sienkiewicz that when I look at his art, I get the same feelings I do as H.R. Geiger, and he really appreciate that. There's a picture on my Instagram somewhere of he and I. He's just a tad shorter than me, which surprised me. But we I can't get over. I always think, maybe it's where I'm over 50, but I've been like this my entire life. I always realize how lucky we were to be involved in this medium, even before internet, YouTube, all that stuff. Because when you did comics, read comics, and really found stuff like this, that it felt like everyone was missing out, and comics had a much bigger stigma than they do now. The stigma is still there, but not like, I don't think a lot of people could handle the experience in some places. A lot of people, it was no problem where people mind their own business, but in a small town, they were like, you read comics at a certain age,
It's true.
So I think we grew up in a really lucky time to be, to have all these creative works like Frank Miller, like Watchmen, like all that Alan Moore stuff. And I'm glad we were there to experience this stuff for the first time. I would love to go back and read Watchmen for the first time, Dark Knight Returns for the first time, Miracle Man for the first time, and Born Again for the first time now that I'm older. You know what I mean? Like, I think,
it's a wonderful experience. It really is. It just is. And
maybe there'll be a resurgence of some time of somebody doing something that'll give you that same feeling.
Sure.
Again one day,
Yeah, I think it still happens generationally. It happens. Works that are happening now, it's affecting people that get affected us. But for us, this were the ones that did it for us. I'm just hoping that younger generations pick up these books and read them and find something good in them, something that they like.
Yeah, that might be the only thing I'm jealous about, is people who get to do it for the first time.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that. I can live through them. I can look at those faces. I used to see that on YouTube quite a bit, but it's been a while.
Well, what's going to happen in about 20 years? You're going to have people saying, you really missed out. What do you mean? The first TikTok video. You were not there. You don't understand. Or my first tweet. You were not there. What the first tweet meant.
I remember when YouTube had a star system, and you could give it up to 5 stars. It was amazing.
That's what it's going to be. No, but thank you. To get back to your pipes, thank you, Tim, for doing this, and I enjoyed it. And everyone that was here, thank you for stopping by. All
right, guys, be excellent to each other. Enjoy yourself. Hit the bell. Go to Gore Vidal's channel, as well. Check out his stuff. And we had a blast. Absolutely. Thanks for everybody joining us.
Makes my weekend.
Later.